Hi, hey, hello. I am Unapologetically Heather, here to empower and inspire. Welcome to another episode of Unapologetically Heather, Raw and Rising, the podcast where we get real and raw, unfiltered stories behind entrepreneurship and personal growth. Last month, we actually focused on co-hosts who had stories of extreme comebacks, whether those were from divorce, whether those were from career setbacks or diversity. We're diving into pivoting when it's hard. Every episode will bring you stories that will highlight resilience, perseverance, and the beauty of rising from challenges. I am super ecstatic to announce that our co-host joining us today is Minal. Minal, actually, this is her first podcast appearance, so I'm super excited for us to be able to experience this together. She is a powerhouse early career coach. Minal has an incredible story of thriving through tough transitions. So before we jump into your story, let's get to know Minal a little bit more. So can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on my first podcast. I'm very excited. Sure, I'll tell you about me. I'm a mom of three amazing kids. My oldest is 8. My middle just turned 5 2 weeks ago, and my baby is 3.5. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I've been in the mental health field for about 10 years. Got licensed in California and then moved out to Austin, Texas during the pandemic. And before that, I kind of lived and traveled all over the world doing a ton of different jobs, but never really settling on a career. I worked in marketing and advertising for a marketing firm in Indonesia. I did HR for an entertainment company in New York. I wrote articles for a private equity fund in Mumbai. And I was an executive assistant to a chief officer at a tech company in San Francisco. So that's kind of my background, 10 years in corporate, 10 years in mental health, turning all of that into becoming a career success coach.
That is awesome. And that's a lot of experience crammed all into a very small amount of time, it seems like.
Yes. It was like 2 years here and 2 years there and 2 years in 3 and yeah.
Yeah, so I have something very similar, but it's a lot less experience, but still a lot all to cram into one little segment in life, it feels like. So we're going to make it fun, and I would love to know one fun or interesting fact about you that we wouldn't find on social media.
Okay. When I was I was volunteering and I was working at this private equity fund. But before I came back to the States, I just had it in my mind that I wanted to become a yoga instructor, or I wanted to get trained to become a yoga instructor. So I went down to Kerala to this amazing ashram, actually. And it was right next to a lion sanctuary. And so we would wake up every morning at like 5 or 5:30 to start practicing, and we would actually wake up with the lions roaring right next door.
Oh, that's amazing. You know what? I bet we'll have to have you back after, you've been on other podcasts, because you have some incredible stories to share.
Too. It definitely. It's been fun.
So Minal, this month, our theme is all about pivoting when it's hard. As with our audience, this will be the first time I've ever heard your story as well. So let's jump in.
Okay. Honestly, I feel like my whole life has been one big pivot. I will get to my career stuff, but when I was 7, my parents picked us up. We moved to Africa for 2.5 years. Then we moved back to New York. And then when I was applying to college, my mom was like, no, don't go to California. It's too far. Go to Boston. And I was like, okay, what do I know? And they picked up and moved to Dubai 4 days later. And I was like, okay, cool. Now, the coldest part of the country, and you guys are like on the other end of the world, right? And so change for me has never been this kind of stifling experience. For me, it's always just been something you do and something you kind of rise to the occasion. And I think the faster that I could get on board, the more power it gave me to kind of write my narrative, to create whatever I wanted to. So during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I was in San Francisco, met my husband, got licensed as a psychotherapist, and I really only did therapy in person. I just strongly believed in that value. I thought face-to-face was really important. Pandemic hit, much like everybody. I think everybody had to find some pivot, right? So I pivoted to online therapy. It was challenging because, as Heather just recently found out, I am not the most tech-savvy person. So the whole tech experience was a lot in and of itself. And then I think figuring out how to navigate building relationships while not being in person, timing, where in the camera do you look? What does this look like? are you talking? Am I talking? The pauses, like, it's hard, right? And then, you get to that and, I successfully navigated that. And then recently, as the economy has been shifting, I am a private pay therapist, so I don't take insurance. And in the mental health field, I think, again, based on the economy, a lot of people are really wanting to use their insurance. So, the market for me has turned down a little bit. I also love therapy, but I just think the one-to-one model is not sustainable for the next 20, 25 years of my life. So I was like, okay, I don't want to let my business die. I just feel like I have so much experience. I went to graduate school to become a therapist. I have so much knowledge. How can I pivot my business into something that feels different, it feels empowering, but it also feels like something that I'm good at. And so I recently launched a coaching business. In my head, I was like, oh my gosh, I have this great idea, right? Like, life is just full of great ideas. And I'm like, I'm going to launch this business. So I joined a coaching program to launch a coaching program. And at first I was like, my business is going to be, I'm going to teach early career professionals to overcome anxiety and self-doubt. And I'm going to teach them all the skills they need to be successful professionally. Great, Minal, right? But like, how do you market something like this, right? So I'm like going along and I'm creating my program and I'm creating all this, like all these posts for Facebook, which is like totally new to me. If anybody knows me, I think the last time I posted on Facebook was like 10 years ago, right? Like I just am not, everyone's like, share pictures. I'm like, I take a ton of pictures. I just don't post them anywhere. So then I was like, okay, so I did my first month and I was like, it's just too broad. So I was like, okay, I need to pivot into something that feels kind of more sustainable, again, like more marketable. And so that was a month went by and I was like, oh, here we go again, right? I got to pivot. So I'm like, okay, so I pivot. And last week, my coach was like, what do you think about focusing on kind of public speaking and presentation skills? And I was like, you know what? That sounds really good, right? So my first go at this was confident career launch, right? And I'm like, okay, like that sounds good, but it doesn't fit the bill anymore. And so over the weekend, I was thinking about it. And this is actually perfect timing because yesterday I pivoted again. And we went from that to, okay, I think I'm going to do helping corporate professionals overcome anxiety, fears, imposter syndrome while mastering the art of public speaking and confident communication. And that feels like so aligned for who I am and what I want to do. And this is so that they can ultimately build a career of their dreams, whether that means like landing a high profile presentation or getting that like dream gig that they're looking for, right? Being able to present confidently, advocate for themselves, set themselves up for promotion, like whatever that means, build their dream career. I think by not trying to do everything, I can actually do more.
Yeah.
I've literally pivoted, I want to say, like probably 6 times since I started, maybe 3 months ago, and maybe 3 times in the last week.
That's the beauty of pivots, though, right? It's so funny, too, because I'm not a Friends watcher. I never really have been. I'm more into crime shows. But I saw the idea of like this pivot. And, during COVID, they started using that like phrase from Friends. And so I started looking into it. And I feel like that's the beauty of the pivot is there is no right or wrong time. It's just what is right for you. What does the pivot look like? And pivots look different for everybody. Some of them are really huge. Yeah. Some of them are really small pivots, but nevertheless, it ends up being a huge change in your life.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And so I also think that I don't think that it's by mistake that I met you and that we connected because I am a huge mental health advocate. And so I have depression and anxiety. And so that's kind of where the idea for this podcast was born is I feel as though as a professional, but also as an entrepreneur, I feel like we get so stuck in what social media says we're supposed to look like as business owners, what we're supposed to post. Don't post the bad things because then people won't trust you. Don't post the bad points in your life. Don't post the low points in your career or in your business because then people won't trust you. They won't do business with you. that is where I feel like we have the biggest opportunity as not only entrepreneurs, but also as removing the stigma from mental health. Your mental health is important, but it's also important to other people. You have no idea who is struggling with the same things that you are right in this moment. And I bet there are probably hundreds of women out there in a very similar situation to you. And so I love that the very first episode of this mini series is you in the midst of a whole bunch of different pivots.
And literally, like, if I were like, here, go to my Facebook page, it's still going to be Confident Career Launch, right? Because all these pivots are in my head and they're literally still happening. And I haven't quite, I feel like I've landed, but like, I can't make those changes yet. And so, I think to your point, mental health is pivotal to our well-being, and I genuinely believe in talking about all the things, not just the good things. I think the hard things are really what make people people, and the hard times, the challenging times are where we grow, but it's not always fun and it's not always exciting. I think it can be, but I don't know. I think this has been quite the journey. And, every time I'm like, I think I got it. And I go with gusto. And then I'm like, oh man, don't quite have it yet. Right. Like, let me try a different angle, or let me try something else. But I actually like sharing that with people. I like telling them like how hard it's been, or, even like I have a friend who just had a baby and she called me literally in tears and was like, oh my gosh, like it's so hard and nobody says that it's so hard. And like, I hate my partner. And I was like, oh man, welcome to the club. Right. Like parenting is hard and it's a ton of pivots. And they were like, but nobody talks about it. And I'm like, yeah, nobody talks about the hard things. So, I applaud you for doing this and for putting it out there, because I really, really believe it is so important. And if it can change one person's point of view or help them get through something, then I'm all for that.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel like too that it becomes the community that you build. I mean, sharing the, I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, being an entrepreneur is not all rainbows and unicorns. Like, I cry a lot. I cry a lot. I've been an entrepreneur for, little over 3 years. And I'm like, I run 5 businesses, podcast obviously being one of them. But I feel like it's really important to create, and that's kind of what this podcast is intended to start, is to create a movement of embracing the community that you have, but also embracing the opportunities, because I hate weaknesses, but the bad things about being an entrepreneur. Because on the other side of it, you're talking about you're trying to get more active on social media and putting all the content together, and then it's nowhere to be found. But it's, about the fact that you're in the pivot right now. You are living pivot right now. And so in 6 months, when, we do a revisit or we come back and we check in, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, like that's where you were. You can see the confusion, but look at the beauty in the journey at where you are now. All the confusion, all for at the end of the day, it to turn into this beautiful thing that you never, ever, ever thought would come to fruition.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a journey. It is. I'm definitely in the middle of it. That is for sure. I definitely want to be seeing the rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, and hopefully in 6 months. Hopefully in 6 months we'll get there. But I mean, again, I think it's an interesting process. And I think at least the way I look at it is like, okay, this is new, right? Like I started my psychotherapy business from scratch. Like it's fine. It's going, it's good. I feel like this is a very different beast in a way. It's a different, therapy. I feel like word of mouth, referrals, you get put on a bunch of listservs, like people start coming in, you can join panels. Like this is like, who do you know? How do you know them? How do you get your name out there, right? And so it's a whole, not only is it trying to figure out what you want to do and honing into it, but then it's figuring out how do you do this, right? And how do you do it in a way that feels good, or it feels authentic to you, or it feels aligned, and how does it reach this audience that like you don't know who they are or have access, And so like part of the pivot was I can't really find these like first out, recent college grads, like straight out of school, starting their new jobs. Like I don't know that they're on Facebook. Like maybe they're on Instagram and I have to start making reels, or maybe they're on LinkedIn and I have to start doing that, right? But that just is like a whole nother beast to conquer, which is great. And I will totally do it because I'm up for the challenge. But again, I see these pivots as challenges, yes, but also, again, opportunities to kind of get more aligned with how I operate, more aligned with like my ideal client avatar or whatever you want to call it, or like my, the thing, because I think at the end of the day, like the more pivots you have to get you aligned, the more successful you're actually going to be, because you're actually going to get to that spot. I think if you, or if people like historically are like, this is what I'm going to do, and like, I'm stuck here, right? And like, they're like, I'm going to ride or die this thing out, and you're like, yeah, but like, you could just like slightly pivot. And they're like, no, this is, I almost feel like you're death stamped, and so like, yes, challenge is hard and change is challenging and all of these things. But I do think ultimately it gets you to where you need to be, where you're supposed to be, hopefully where you want to be. So.
And I love this, and I love it because typically, the guests that we've had on the podcast, we share, the whole conversation is based on what happened, how did this shape who you are today, how does it change how you deal with struggles now? And I feel like we're speaking in present tense, so it generates a different type of conversation because you have no idea where this is going. You know where you want it to be.
Hopefully up. I mean, I kind of I have an idea of what I want. I have an idea of where I want to be, but I don't know what that journey is going to look like and when I'm going to get there.
Right.
Or how I'm going to get there.
Yes. So being in it now, typically one of the questions that I ask is, how did you feel in the moment that you had to pivot? So I feel like, again, very relevant, but this is probably one of the most rare conversations you will have with someone, to catch them in the perfect moment of, you've made several pivots over the last couple of weeks, right? And you still are. I bet you there's probably another handful of them coming.
I feel them coming. I have to say, like, I feel like there are weeks where, like, I don't know if this happens for you, but like your creative juices just kind of flow and you're like, oh, this is good, right? And then obviously you have to put something down and go tend to life, and then it picks back up and you're like, no, wait, actually, like if I just tweak this like one thing, like maybe it'll be a little better, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think, yes, we're definitely not done. I want to say we're almost there, but like honestly, to your point, I'm in it, so who knows what this is going to look like. I mean, I am able to laugh about it simply because like this is kind of how I live my life. I feel like as a mom of 3, like my husband is traveling this week, like we're constantly like, oh, we left your lunchbox at home, or like, oh, you woke up with like, an ear infection. And I'm like, okay, like how you're just constantly juggling all these things and going from like one lane to another avenue to like the whole boulevard. And you're like, I don't know how it got here, right? Like it all just happens, but like I'm here and I'm okay.
Yeah. So, well, and I want to ask too, since you kind of segued into that, I think a lot of times we focus so much on separate your personal from your business. Don't bring your business home. Don't take your personal to work. Leave it at the door. There is a separation between, your personal life and your business life. I say they're lying. There's not. Especially when you're a business owner, right? Because, I mean, in order to build a clientele, you are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, generating ideas. And like you said, coming up with these, like when your creative juices hit, it's like, I got to go before I forget all of this stuff.
Yes.
And so, if I put this thing down right now, in 5 minutes, I'm going to forget. It's going to be gone. The vibe is not the same.
Yes, it's so true.
But what I want to ask you is, these pivots in life, you have 3 little ones. And so, well, one of them, I guess, is not so little, 8, but younger than mine. So, being a mom and having 3 kids, how has that influenced how you pivot in your business, or the feelings and the process that you go through, or vice versa? How has the pivots in your business or in your career, how has that influenced the pivots that you perceive in life, like what the process looks like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. To answer your first question of like, how does it feel when I'm pivoting? I think the first thing is like, damn it.
Again.
I'm like, like I can't believe we're doing this again. And then honestly, shortly thereafter, it's like and then I have that moment of like clarity or, precision or excitement. And I'm like, okay. And then I get super excited and then I'm like, okay, fine, we're pivoting, we're doing it, we're running into it. And then to answer the second question of like, how does one inform the other? I actually think being a therapist more than anything has informed being a mom. And I mean, I know you can't turn business off, but you also you can't turn therapy off. It's like, is this okay? How do they feel? What do they think? What do they need? Okay, this isn't working. Okay, let's try this strategy. Or, okay, am I going to jack my kids up for life? Are they going to be in therapy too? Probably. The reality is everyone's going to be in therapy no matter what you do and no matter how well you parent. And so I think that was a lesson that's learned very early on that has informed actually a lot of my pivots, or just whether it's being a mom or being a coach or being a therapist or just an entrepreneur in general. Life happens and it's okay, right? Again, it doesn't always feel great. It doesn't always look great, but it's going to be okay. And if you can at least have some kind of mentality around I'm going to get through this, I'm strong enough, they're going to be okay, I'm going to be okay, then these pivots, again, kind of just feel like some of them are really fun, especially with the kids. Some of them are really scary, But again, I think my end goal is always not it's not always to thrive. Sometimes it's really just to survive. Are we okay? Did we get through this moment? And is everybody in their bed and safe and fed? It's not about did we have the best day and everybody best person all the time? That's great. Good for you. Post that on Instagram. But real life just doesn't work that way, And so, yeah, I have actually never put my career before my kids. And, I can't say that I'm doing that now either. But recently there have been more moments of oh, hang on, mama has a thought, and I'll put it down and then put my phone away. I'm not on it constantly because I don't like to be on it around them as much as I can, tolerate it or make that happen. But there have been a lot more moments of they're talking to me and I'm thinking about something, and I'm okay, bring it back to the present moment. They're only here for so long. So yeah, I think one informs the other and it kind of they all inform each other, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. I just started reading the Mel Robbins Let Them theory. So she has a book out. It's called Let Them. So I actually just shared this with my therapist this morning. And it's really ironic, I guess, that we're on the same topic of, you're not allowing certain things to bleed. You have the control. You have the choice. You get to choose what you want to focus on. And also realizing that, my daughter, she's 16. I have 2 summers left with her before she is an adult and goes away to college. And while I'm super proud, I can be proud and sad at the same time because I spent the majority of the time when she was younger being a single parent. And so there were constant worries. It was that constant anxiety. Again, the constant questions, am I messing my kid up forever? And now it's looking back on those things, I wish I had given myself more grace. Mm-hmm. I wish I had been more present with her instead of worrying about the constant stressors of life impacting her. And this let them theory, I heard about it a couple of years ago. And I never bought into it. And the reason is because I feel like it has always felt to me as though this let them theory is about letting other people do whatever they're going to do. If they're going to be mad, let them be mad. If they're going to talk about you behind your back, let them talk about you. But I think we missed the most important part of this whole thing for all of our mental health's sake, which is it's about let them and let me. Let them do what they're going to do. Then allow yourself the capacity and the focus on what can you control? Mm-hmm. And how are you going to react to these situations. And so I love that you have focused on your business and what that looks like. But in pivoting, because your husband's gone for the week, you know where the priority is for you, which is at the end of the day, we do this all for our kids. We do this so that our kids see that you can be strong. You can be independent, but you can also still be dependent on your marriage. You can still be present with them and prioritize them while being an entrepreneur. That's a lot to pack in.
It is a lot to pack in. You do not want to see me at 8:30 p.m. I am like done.
Overstimulated.
I'm done. I am ready to go to bed when they go to bed. I am done. But yeah, I mean, a big, a big value of mine has always been parenthood, being a mom, being present for my kids. Even when I have my therapy practice, I run it. We wake up in the morning, I drop them to school, I work out because, again, not a great person if I don't. Got to know your strengths. And then I work from 10 to 3, right? So I have my practice. I'm fully engrossed in my work when I work. And then I pack up shop and I put my phone away, ideally, and I spend my afternoons and evenings with them. Because to your point, it goes by so fast. And, your business is going to be there, but your kids aren't. And I don't know. It's just, that's what my mom did for us. And I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that whenever we were originally talking about you being on the show and, you being a co-host, there was one of the questions that you answered that was very relative to who you are. And so you are a first generation Asian. And is there anyone else in your family that has ventured out into being an entrepreneur or being a business owner while juggling all the other aspects of life?
No, so that's actually a great question. So I'm Indian, from India, from Mumbai. My parents live there now with my grandma. So it's interesting. My parents are quite liberal in terms of kind of like their politics and their lifestyle, but raising me, they were extremely traditional. And so I have 2 brothers. I'm the middle. My older brother got to do everything and anything, and I couldn't really do anything, right? I had a curfew, and I had to get the best grades, and I had to do like literally all the things. And I would tell them all the time. It wasn't like I was silenced or I didn't have a voice. I'd be like, you guys are really hypocritical. Like, this is so unfair. The standards are not the same, like all the things. Went to the college they wanted to. I moved to Indonesia to be with them after I got, and a lot of my path was kind of intertwined with them until I moved to India to be with my grandmother, and then they moved too. And I was like, I love you guys so much, and this is really fun. And I feel like I can't. Like, everyone was like, you have to get married, and you have to go to this wedding, and you have to attend this, and you have to look like this, and you can't talk about that, and you have to present a certain way, to your point, and you have to appear a certain way, and you're too old now. Like, you have to be married. No one's going to marry you. Like, maybe it's the divorce circuit. And I'm like, wow, like, this is just like too much. And at some point, I think I just hit my breaking point of living my life for everyone else. And it's like, I am leaving. I'm going back to New York. I'm going to go to grad school. I want to become a therapist. And in Southeast Asian culture, that's not a thing. Like, mental health is not a thing. Therapy is not a thing. My mom now has come around and is like, what you do is amazing. I'm so proud of you. You help so many people. My dad thinks I'm a teacher and calls my sessions classes, and my clients, he calls them students. And it's still just such a foreign concept. Yeah. But when I was going back to school, my parents were like, no. Like, my grandmother literally said to me, Minal, you are one of the smartest women I know. No one is going to marry you if you go back to school. And I was like, that's okay. I'm okay with that. Like, I cannot let your story be my story. I cannot let your fears be my fears. Like, I am so done living this life for everyone else. Even if I fail, I need to go and do this by myself. So I did. And then, I moved, I did grad school. In grad school, I quickly came to learn that the things that I like to do, the things I didn't want to do, the things I was good at, the things I wasn't. And I just wanted a lot of freedom and flexibility. And so when I started my own company, again, it was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, why aren't you joining a company? Why aren't you, at that point I had met my now husband. We'd met when I just started grad school, but like, why don't you let him support you? Or like, why don't you have babies? And it was just this idea of like, being independent, doing something on your own, taking risks, doing the so to answer your question, no, like my dad is an entrepreneur, which is why we moved around so much growing up. He was his own businessman, bought, sold, traded goods kind of all over the world. But I don't think it ever occurred to my parents that like any of us would do that, or that the girl in the family would be the one to do it.
That's a proud accomplishment. I mean, that just hearing that makes me proud as a woman to know, I would assume that's probably one of the most risky pivots you've ever made in life, is going against culture. I mean, this is what you're born and bred into. I mean, I was raised in a very Southern family. I'm originally from South Carolina. And so, there are a lot of things that in therapy I have realized that my parents, while thinking they were doing the best for me and making the best decisions they could for me, I have realized that I did EMDR for a short period of time. And so, it's all about, okay, when's the first time you felt that? What about before that? What about before that? And it's like, there was an epiphany when I went all the way back to my childhood, and I was like, my parents did this to me.
All about parents.
Yeah. And so again, it's one of those things that's like, we talk about mental health now, and it's talked about a lot more now. Thank God. It is talked about a lot more now than it was, 10 years ago, because like you said, that's, in your culture, and very similar here. My husband's in the military, and they still have a long road ahead of them.
Yeah.
When you're talking about mental stability, mental health stability, and doing your job every single day. It's about, we don't talk about mental health. Whatever you think that is, it's not. There's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're overreacting. You're overthinking this. Those are not real feelings.
Yeah, those are not real problems. Oh,
Yes.
why are you making such a big deal about this? Like, everybody has an eating disorder, so they can look like that. You're like, oh, like, hang on, like, what? Even, I mean, and my mom, bless her, like, now, like I said, she's proud and she gets it, and everyone's in therapy and everyone's in couples therapy. Like, it's great. But she still subscribes to, like, I don't need a therapist. I have a glass of wine and I have my friends, and like, that is just that mentality.
Yes. And you know what? I love that you mentioned that. I love that you mentioned that, because I have several friends that are, a little bit older than I am, but my husband also, raised in a totally different environment than I am. His family dynamic, totally different than mine. And so now, when we first met 5 years ago, he was very much of the same opinion. You can't be a victim forever. Just because you have DV in your past and mental and emotional abuse, like, you can't live like that forever. This is not real. These aren't real feelings. You're overreacting. Just let it go.
Or get over it.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Man, I wish it was that easy. And now, with me deciding for myself, I'm going back to therapy. I cannot control what you guys do. I can only control my own behaviors and my own emotions for my own mental well-being. And in order to take care of my family and give to my marriage and be a good mom to my kids, I have to go back to therapy. And so it's been a very interesting parallel to watch him grow in his knowledge and his education and his beliefs of mental health and depression and anxiety, that this is a real thing, that it kills people. I mean, this literally kills people every single day, because we have become a society that stuffs everything down and tells everybody that your feelings aren't valid. You're overreacting. No, they can be both. They can be wrong in your opinion, and their feelings can be valid. Let them scream. Let them be mad. Let them do what they're going to do. And at the end of the day, who have they hurt? Nobody.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think this is a really important conversation. And yes, to your point, that was the biggest pivot of my life.
Yeah.
And the best one.
Oh, I bet you probably wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, damn, I did that.
Sometimes I do. And it feels really good. It does.
Well,
and, I think part of the reason, again, to bring it back to this podcast, I think part of the reason I wanted to come on here was to share part of that story too, right? That like, I imagine there's so many women like me who are, in family of origins like mine, or traditional backgrounds or cultures or countries. And like, for some people, yes, it's not safe to break the mold. For some people, it's not possible. For those who are thinking about doing it and have the means and the resources, like, do it.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because before we wrap up today, I want to ask you if there's one piece of advice, encouragement, wisdom that you could leave our listeners with today, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think, again, while pivots are not always ideal, there's just so many opportunities for growth and change and challenge, and really finding alignment with what you want to do, what you're meant to do, what you can do. And so really seeing them not as lost time, but as experience gained and as new opportunities that are coming your way.
I love that. So thank you so much, Minal, for joining me today, for co-hosting with me. I absolutely enjoyed our conversation. And I loved the focus on mental health, because that's really what this podcast is all about, is taking care of ourselves, but taking care of each other and sharing stories, no matter how difficult they are. And no matter how hard they seem in the pivot. So I would encourage you today to keep going. You already know this. Going, because the pivots, man, that's where you find the beautiful things about yourself. I think that's when we learn the most, is in the pivots. It's not after them. It's not looking back on them. It's in them. And so being present in those pivots and embracing the complicated things, as well as the beautiful things about the journey of being a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely comes with its pros and its cons, or it's, ups and its downs, whatever you want to call them. Yes. I mean, there are some great things, and there are also some very challenging things. So yes.
It's been a privilege co-hosting with you today. Before we sign off, where can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more about you, your business, what you do, and what you're getting into in 2025?
Sure. I am on Facebook. I'm currently building out my website, but I'm on Facebook. You can find me. I think the name will be Minal Nebhnani Coaching. I have a group, a free Facebook group, where I put a ton of kind of tips and tricks, guides, things like that for professionals to help overcome anxiety and imposter syndrome, so that, they can lead with confidence. And then I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn. So just my name, you should be able to find me.
Perfect. So that's it for today's episode of Unapologetically Heather, Raw and Rising. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope that you found as much inspiration in Minal's story as I did. Don't forget to follow the podcast, our Instagram, and Facebook for more raw, unfiltered stories, and I'll see you next time. Until then, keep it real, stay rising, and never apologize for being you. Catch you later.
Thank you so much for having